Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Liv Mendelson, and I'm the artistic director of this festival. And on behalf of the presenting partner, the Miles Nadal JCC, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the fifth Toronto Real Abilities Film Festival and our very first virtual festival. We are so glad to be able to offer this festival online. Thank you to our sponsors, the Government of Canada, Government of Ontario, the P&L Odette Foundation, the Toronto Arts Council, Autism Ontario, and our media partners, Accessible Media Inc., AI Media, and Mohawk College Accessible Media Production Program. I am just going to make sure that you can all see and hear me. Yes, I believe it's working. Toronto's home base is in Toronto to Toronto, which is in the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We acknowledge the diversity of the First Peoples of this area and honor them as stewards of this land, builders of communities, and shapers and keepers of culture. Wherever you are watching, take some time to consider the territory you are living on. We also encourage you to check out the work of and support our friends at Imaginative. Imaginative is the world's largest presenter of Indigenous screen content, and they're really fabulous. This event is co-presented by the Alliance of Equality for Blind Canadians, the CNIB, Tangled Art Plus Disability, and Inside Out Film Festival. We thank them for being our community partners. Please note that CART and ASL are available for this event. I'd like to thank our interpreters Amanda Hyde and Vera Goody and our captioner Kim. To view the captions, please click on the closed captioning CC button at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions tonight, and we hope that you will, please enter those using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you're having tech difficulties, you can troubleshoot with our staff in the chat or email raffhelp, R-A-F-F help, at mnjcc.org. I'm excited to welcome our moderator, Ophira Kaloff. I have extensive notes here about Ophira, but I'm going to go off script. Ophira is an actor, a writer, a producer, an opera singer, a comedian. She is truly an extraordinary person and an extraordinary presence. She also happens, lucky for us, to be the comedy coordinator of Real Abilities. And we're thrilled to have her moderate this panel and to speak to these amazing films. So welcome, and Ophira, take it away.
Oh goodness, that was such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Liv. I'm really excited to be here and be part of this panel. As likely everyone who's joining us now has had the chance to watch these three incredible films. And I'm really excited to get to chat with the creative forces behind them. So first off, I just want to give a brief visual description of myself. I'm femme presenting, and I have long curly hair with a shaved side undercut. I'm wearing a pair of medium thick framed turquoise glasses, and I'm wearing a neck brace, which is visible in the camera frame. And now I have the honor of getting to introduce each of these panelists. So I'm going to read their bios and then afterwards ask each one to give a brief visual description of themselves. So first up, we have Cody Bennett, who's the writer and director of Love Beyond Accessibility. Cody is an emerging producer and writer with a passion for accessible media. He's a graduate of Humber College's Film and Television Production program. And during his time at Humber, he produced A Chinese Love Song, as well as wrote and directed this film that was screening at the festival, Love Beyond Accessibility. And he recently received the Stuart Aziz Memorial Scholarship in 2020. So Cody, would you mind just saying hi and giving a brief visual description of yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cody. I have medium length auburn hair, bright red beard. I'm wearing a black hoodie that says Humber on it currently.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Next up on our panel list, collection of panel lists, something like that, I'm going to be introducing Jenna Roy and Shay Ehrlich, and I'm going to introduce them together because they're going to be coming out of the same camera frame. But first up, and they are the performers and creative forces behind A Provocation on Wheels. So first up is Shay. Shay is a hard of hearing, multiply disabled, community engaged artist and wheelchair dancer. Shay is the co-founder of the Cyborg Circus Project with their partner, Jenna Roy. The Cyborg Circus Project is a dance and circus project by and for disabled movement artists, which seeks to provide accessible, disability-centered opportunities for community participation and professionalization opportunities in movement arts. The Cyborg Circus Project has performed original dance work both locally and internationally, including In Situ 2018, Next Fest 2019, and the Contact Dance International Film Festival 2019. And now to introduce Jenna Roy, who is a wheelchair dancer and performance artist. Jenna is the co-founder of the Cyborg Circus Project along with Shay, and they have a diverse arts-based and community education teaching practice, which predominantly focuses on access and inclusion. She has taught both locally and within Canada, including at educational institutions, community settings, and conferences. Her practice stems from their experiences as a queer, mad, multiply disabled person, and they envision a future where disability justice informed art has permeated the fabric of the arts in Canada, which I think we all very much dream of that as well. Shay and Jen, if you can say hi and give a brief visual description of yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Shay. I am a white, non-binary person who is currently seated on a couch. I have relatively short, though longer than typical, dark brown hair, a nose piercing, and I am wearing a black shirt with small polka dots that are yellow, burgundy, green, and cream colored.
I'm Jen. I am a white, femme-presenting person with longer hair in the middle of my head, but it's shaved on the sides. It's also kind of a medium brown. I wear like purple glasses. Today I'm wearing a dark blue shirt with a really like fun collar with a zipper on it that is really like texturally enjoyable, and some gray pants. I am sitting on the same couch, and it has a really fun purple and pink blanket on the back of it that was hand crocheted, by a dear friend of mine. So that's the end of my visual description.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And now to introduce the final panelist, Christopher Cosgrove, who's the writer and director of the film Boldly Go. So a geeky Brisbane boy with an addiction to tiny teddies, Christopher Cosgrove has spent the last decade working as a freelance editor, cutting television commercials and corporate videos for clients such as Super A-Mart, Rio Tinto, and Dreamworld. Frustrated by offline media and insufficient disk space, Christopher is eager to transition from the edit lab to the director's chair. Last year, he emigrated to Sydney in order to develop his directing chops at the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. While completing a graduate certificate, he wrote and directed Boldly Go, an autobiographical short film about the challenges of dating with a colonoscopy bag. Welcome, Christopher, and if you can say hi and give a visual description.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a Caucasian, 34-year-old masculine presenting male. I've got short brown curly hair, brown eyes, and sort of short brown stubble. It's a little bit raggedy from isolation life. I'm wearing a white collared shirt that's got sort of a light floral print on it, and a burgundy hoodie that the cords have been a bit frayed from a puppy earlier today.
Oh dear. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for both joining this discussion and also for the work that you've all created. I'm sure that the audience has lots of things to say and lots of questions, but I am the host of this panel, so I get to start with my own. So to start off, I'd love to know sort of what the story is behind the development of each of your films. And we can go in the same order that we did the visual descriptions in. Cody, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, I can do that. So the story behind Love Beyond Accessibility is basically I found, or at Humber, we had Making Accessible Media developed by one of my former instructors, which is a free course that anyone can go online and take. And during our strike, there wasn't much else to do but to get invested in this. And I found it really engaging and eye-opening. And my instructor had always been focused on accessibility. So we were pitching documentaries, and I wanted to pitch a doc that attempted to be as accessible as it could be from the get-go and had planned accessibility in it. And originally it was going to be about transitioning a poem into ASL, but then it adapted to something that we felt would connect more with people, which was my cousin Shandy's wedding, and how that was going to change her life and change their lives together, because her partner isn't living with any disabilities. She's living with a disability and has a double transplant that she's dealing with, and then turns out severe anxiety. So we thought that was going to really be great to share her story.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shay and Jen, just to repeat the question, sort of what's the story behind the development of the work that was shared as part of the festival?
So A Provocation on Wheels is a short dance work that we had originally developed for stage. When we were in the very, very early stages of the development of that work, we had been told that we were going to have skateboarding ramps to perform it on and create it with. So the very first day that we went out to play around with some of the shapes that you eventually do see in the film, we were at a skateboard park, and we've been heavily influenced by the concept of disabled people, not just in like closed, safe environments, but like actually interacting with the various physical features of the real world.
And they kind of resonate with the idea of like using our bodies inappropriately.
And taking up space in ways that disabled bodies are not often expected to take up space, particularly in public. And then from there, we had this piece, we'd performed it a few times, and Kathleen Ray approached us to create a video submission for the Contact Dance International Film Festival. And immediately, as we started to think about the places where we could film this work, we were brought back to a memory of a time the previous summer where we had found ourselves behind Harvard Collegiate Institute. And for those who aren't familiar with that school in Toronto, behind the school, there is this area where there's a whole bunch of ramps, and then it leads to this platform that I do believe was at least envisioned to be potentially used for performance, where there's these plastic slats and trees sticking up out of it that you see is the setting for the film. And we were really drawn to all of the texture and shapes of that space and how they would interact with the dance forms of the film.
Mm-hmm. So we found a good friend of ours, Olya Glatka, to help us shoot the video. She's a contact dance filmmaker who's fairly known in the scene, and also Kathleen helped us with the video as well, and so did her son. That was a really lovely day. Mm-hmm. He's credited as one of the rehearsal director. I think he got a pretty big credit there. So that was a really lovely day to spend with them.
Mm-hmm. And eventually that produced the footage that you see in the film. And then our vision for the work has always been to make the video itself as accessible as possible. So we've been working for the last several months on audio description, which has resulted in the standard open audio description that we had today. And we're continuing to work with collaborators on developing some future versions of the audio description to really get into the meat of this as a non-visual dance work as well as a visual dance work.
That is so exciting. I just want to make a comment of like, it's very rare to see disabled bodies in nature specifically or outside. And that was something that's so interesting to learn how intentional that choice was. And it really was very touching and beautiful. Chris, what's the story behind the film that was brought here?
So very autobiographical. When I was about 21, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is autoimmune sort of inflammatory bowel disease. And I've had to have about 5 bowel resections over the last 10 years. And it's quite common when you have to have a bowel resection that you have to have a colostomy bag or a ileostomy bag. It just depends what side of the abdomen it's on. And so I've had a colostomy bag twice. The first time was only 3 months. The second time was 3 years. The film Boldly Go is probably more based on the first time. I was quite young. I was 21. I hadn't had a partner before, and I'd actually just finished coming out as gay. So I was kind of processing a lot when I was that age, and was trying to sort of date other guys, and found that I also had this obstacle that I had to overcome, which was, how do you actually raise this up in a conversation? And do you tell someone, when you're about to have sex, or do you tell someone, over first date? Not really good date talk. And so I'd kind of, been on some dates that were better than others. And about a year ago, I got accepted into a master's course for directing. And I was really keen on telling a story to do with, dating with a colostomy bag, but I wanted it to be one of the positive stories. I felt like I didn't have any stories that I could find when I was going through that. I didn't know anyone else that had one. And so I kind of felt like enough time had passed that I was okay talking about it. And I wanted to, share a positive story about what it's like to be really intimate with someone in terms of opening up and being honest about your body and what you're going through, and that wonderful feeling when the other person kind of captures you and says, that's fine.
That's so beautiful. It's funny that you say the idea of just trying to figure out, like, when do you bring things up? How do you do it? I've definitely more than once typed into my Google search bar, like, dating with a disability, ? And most of the articles are people being like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what we do. I also really appreciate what you just brought up, because that kind of leads me into my next question. I feel like all 3 of these films really had that element of something like very vulnerable, like a personal experience, personal identity, a personal journey. And all of these films then involved that like extremely vulnerable personal thing then being shared with family, with partners, with peers. And I guess kind of the act of making art in general, the act of putting a film out into the world is essentially that same process of taking something personal and sharing it with whoever sees it. And I'd love to know your thoughts on community and how community and different relationships inform your work as an artist. Oh, we can go, if we can go in the same order as before, that might be helpful just for orienting everyone.
I found that for me, community was like, I tried multiple times looking over the question, trying to answer it. And the best thing I could come up with is community is integral to our ability to be able to tell our stories and to share ourselves with everybody. And I feel that what I've been trying to do with the films that I've made recently and been a part of making is be as helpful as I can to put something good out in the world that helps share a story that may not be heard before or hasn't got as much recognition as it needs. And just the ability to, for example, getting to share Shandy's wedding video to her, which we didn't get to be a part of the film, but we ended up making a described video of her wedding. And without this documentary, without this chance to tell a story and share that with her community, she wouldn't have had that. And for me, that's the most important thing, is to be able to have people's voices and moments be heard and sort of captured for a long period of time.
That's so incredible. I think especially with the work that you did in terms of making weaving accessibility through the film as a part of the film itself, as opposed to sort of something tacked on only for certain audience members at the end, is really a beautiful testament to the idea of sharing the story with as many people as possible in a way that genuinely works for as many people as possible. What about you, Shay and Jen?
Yeah, for us, one of our central goals as artists is to create works that show everyday moments of disability. Disability isn't this thing that just kind of happens and is out there. It's inherently relational. Disability as a category can only exist if it's in opposition to something else. Otherwise, it's just kind of natural difference. And so we need to use the comparison point between disabled people and non-disabled people. So every experience within the realm of disability is in fact a relational experience. And where that comes into play in this piece is that this piece was really about exploring the kinds of relationships that exist in the disability community, and how we have different relationships with our bodies, our mobility devices, and others than we typically see represented when we think about relationships. Do you want to talk about how that's represented throughout the piece?
Yeah, so when we structured it in 3 different movements, kind of unintentionally, and then when we looked back at it at our first go of it, we're like, okay, this is very clear that it's 3 different pieces. Let's delve into this a little more. And the first one was really about the relationship between a mobility device user and their mobility aid. When you first get the device in your life and you're figuring out how it's going to possibly fit into the life that you have right now, and what even is it and what needs to change, and really that figuring it out sort of stage. And the second movement is once you've sort of actually sat in it, moved around a little bit, and are getting to know what that means to be body and chair as one, what can you do from there as a person? And then the third movement is really a noticing that there are other people like you out there in the world. And now that you've kind of got it figured out. Like you can, or even if you don't have it all totally figured out, you've got it figured out enough to get yourself around in the world, to see other people like you and go out and meet them and come into the community. And like, this was a pretty typical narrative, particularly like because of the way we see disabled people coming into community in Ontario, with the way access to mobility aids has been regulated by funding parties, so that like if you don't have a diagnosis, you can end up housebound or bedbound for many years and very isolated from community until you get that label and that diagnosis to have that access to be able to come back out into community. And so it's kind of a celebration of that freedom. Did I miss anything?
Nope. Yeah, that very much came through to me at that moment of sort of that feeling of freedom, and I fully cried. It was really, really stunning and resonated on such a personal level, which I guess is, yeah, that testament to everything being in relation, people's experiences, shared experience, as well as oppositional experiences. Chris, what are your thoughts on community and how it sort of relates to art?
I think it's really important. For me, in terms of, I guess, my own journey, finding community was very much tied with like a healing process. I understand that, you know, not everyone with a disability, you know, it's a healing journey, but for me, it definitely has been. And I found that whenever I've been very sick, sort of in hospital for a couple of weeks, usually when I come out, I don't want to kind of see other people, and I don't know why. Maybe it's anxiety, or it's kind of, you know, I'm not ready yet. And certainly the first time when I was really sick, sort of around where the movie's set, I definitely, I think, struggled to connect even just with my close friends and explain kind of what had gone on, let alone finding sort of extended community of people that have gone through a similar journey. And so for me, I felt that that was sort of a challenge to sort of overcome. And part of what I wanted to show in the film is that you can only do that yourself. And, you know, the community has to be there if you're sort of isolated. It's a two-way process, I guess I'm trying to describe. That in my situation, I felt there were people there that were willing to help, but I kind of wasn't yet prepared to let them help me. And that when you get to that point where you kind of go, okay, yeah, I need help from other people, and I need friends and family and a support network to get through this, that was actually really kind of liberating and helped me heal and move on. And so that was interesting, that it was sort of an internal kind of struggle to overcome. But once I was able to do that, I was able to be supported by those around me, which was really helpful.
I really, the moment in your film where it felt like this tipping point of like, is this encounter just gonna not happen, or is the conversation gonna happen? And there was, if I'm not mistaken, like kind of like a yell of frustration of like, oh, like of this point. I think it so perfectly encapsulated that feeling of like wanting support and still like that vulnerability. That moment was just really incredibly powerful. I want to say in this chat, if anyone has questions, I think there might be a couple. Please feel free to write them in the chat, to write them in the Q&A. But right now I have a question for Chris from the Q&A. The question says, both characters in your film feel like such distinct personalities. How do you build characters so quickly in such a short film?
Well, it wasn't quick. I think I spent about a year working on the script for that little 5 minutes. Some of it was actually through the course that I was studying. We were learning different techniques for developing character. And I got advice. I got lots of friends to kind of read over it and did lots of different versions, and kind of kept trimming to find where it was started the film. And so I felt that the closer I got to that, the other elements kind of aren't necessary. That if you can really get to the core character, everyone's going to kind of interpret, backfill their own backstory to these characters. And it's been interesting even just hearing other people, audience members, describing, you know, what they thought was the background to different characters in the film. Some of it was also really helpful. I had an amazing production designer who helped build that incredible set and the costumes. And I think that straight away helped sort of set up the characters and a bit of their backstory. But I think, yeah, ultimately it came down to really getting a sense of who these people were in this moment, what was their relationship like with one another. And if that felt honest and believable, then people would kind of be able to attach their own backstory. Oh,
so sorry, I muted myself. But that's incredible. Yeah, because in a short film, I think every little detail becomes so meaningful. And yeah, it was really incredible how full and rich the characters are. I don't see any more questions, although I apologize. Oh, I see one more. For Cody, how much Black Sabbath was played at Shandy's wedding?
I don't think there was any, but there was very likely a lot of Kiss.
Amazing. I am gonna keep watching. We're almost wrapped up, but if I have more questions, if other people don't, so I'm gonna put one more out there. I think we've kind of touched on this in a couple of the different answers, but the title that sort of was put out there for this Q&A and for this event tonight was Bodies, Beauty, and Sexuality, which are themes that are so severely underexplored in how they relate to disability in any type of mainstream media. And I know that myself as an artist, that's something that I think about a lot and really struggle with, you know, how that then affects my work of just being aware that there's so little representation out there. And I'm wondering kind of how that affected each of you or any of you, if that's something you do think about, if that's something that you put to the side. If anyone has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
I'll just jump in and say I was very keen to show a colostomy bag on screen. I don't think I'd ever seen one on screen. And so that was sort of a little personal challenge. It was interesting, even just in the sort of production process, discussions with different people about whether or not to even show it or imply it. And, you know, if I showed it, would that maybe mean that it wouldn't be able to screen at as many places? You know, would it make people uncomfortable? But for me, I was determined. I was like, no, we need to see it. It needs to be a real one. I got my actor to actually wear it all day so that he got used to what that felt like. I very much was aware that it was something that isn't really shown on screen, and so I wanted to kind of give that some visibility.
Yeah, that was really, really incredible to see, because I don't think I've ever seen a colonoscopy bag on screen. I think I've maybe heard it mentioned on the screen, which in itself is such a different experience when it's completely hidden away, as opposed to like, oh, hey, this is reality, and it is part of like a really beautiful moment for a relationship. Amazing. Okay, I think that we ran a little bit over, so I think that we are at the end of this chat. But I'd like to thank you all so much, and very quickly, in like one one sentence, if we can each go around and just say, what's next? As a person, I mean, it's a global pandemic. You don't need to have a big project, but just if there's anything you want to shout out and mention to the audience. So let's start with Cody.
For myself, I'd say look out for A Chinese Love Song, because we just started our festival run where we won Best First Time Student Director at the Asian Cinematography Awards. So I'm really excited that that's going to be going forward for the next year or so.
Amazing. All right, Shay and Jen.
Yeah, right now we have 2 works that we're working on developing. We're still really fascinated by the variations, like in the disability community, of the ways that other disabled people experience their relationships with their mobility devices and their disabilities. And so currently we're in the early stages of working with 2 new dancers so that we can create a new work to fit into the Provocation on Wheels series, which is very exciting. And Jen and I are also partway through the process of developing our first medium-length work, which is called Safe Words, I Didn't Say Broccoli, that focuses on the experience of street harassment that we've experienced as wheelchair users. And so be on the lookout for those 2 exciting developments in an unspecified future period once we move out of pandemic land and back into being able to rehearse.
Incredible. I am very much looking forward to those projects. What about you, Chris?
Hopefully some writing. I'm keen to try and figure out a way to develop Boldly Go into some sort of feature project. But I've also got an idea of working it into a sort of a web series of essentially like similar scenes of 2 different people about to sort of hook up for the first time, and one of them has to reveal something sort of not necessarily a physical issue, but something that's kind of like a shameful secret to them, and just that moment of kind of trust. I really liked that in my film, so I was kind of looking at maybe exploring that as sort of a web series as well.
Oh, that's so cool. Disability arts is in for a very exciting future for all of this.
I'm going to jump in and thank all of you. Ophira, thank you so much. Cody, Christopher, Shay, and Jen, we hope to see lots more work from all of you, and we hope you'll bring it back to festival. And we hope everyone will join us tomorrow for the Witch Hunters and Kupenda, and continuing on through Sunday for lots of workshops and films. And thank you for being with us tonight. And thank you for this amazing work. The shorts program is always exciting for us because it gives us a glimpse into the future. And I'm really excited about what each of you is gonna produce. So thank you, everyone. We're gonna wrap it here, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.